I hope you had a good Thanksgiving. We have a lot to be thankful for, don't we? Yeah, Alex? One of the things I'm thankful for is OCC, and more, as we go along on the pilgrimage, I feel more thankful for this church, the group of people here, and the attitude of gratitude that is here. God uses this community to give us His grace. He does that. It's amazing. We are done with our pilgrimage with the patriarchs in Genesis. At the beginning of the year, in January, we started in chapter 11 of Genesis, and we have marched along until we've completed chapter 35. So we've walked along, yes. How about that? It just goes to show that if you take a few steps, after a while, you're going to get somewhere, right? What a quote right there. Quote of wisdom. Yeah, right? Put that one in the book, Dave. Yeah. That's just deep stuff right here. Deep thoughts. But it's true. We have walked along. And I've never known the patriarchs better than to spend this year with you guys, walking along with them. And now we're done, and what we're going to go into is our Advent season. We've been walking along the Gospel of Luke as well, and we're going to stay in the Gospel of Luke, just go into the early chapters. So I encourage you, if you've been on the pilgrimage reading each day's reader, then continue. It starts tomorrow right here. You can follow along Monday through Friday, 5 readings for each week. And if you've dropped off, get back on the path and let's go together. We can have a good Advent. This is Dawn's design and the Cravey's printing job, so really nice stuff that we get to enjoy here. Yes. So, but our pilgrimage doesn't end. Our spiritual pilgrimage is not something, it's not a short-term thing. It's not a season. It's not a conference. It's not a vacation. It is our whole life. The pilgrimage continues, the spiritual pilgrimage. And so, ending today with this last scripture, this last pairing of Luke and Genesis, it really ends well because it gives us a summary of pilgrimage. Some universal aspects of pilgrimage. We all are on a unique pilgrimage, but there are universal aspects to all of our pilgrimages. And so that's what we've got here today, these points that come out from Genesis and Luke and the connection that's there. And the first is the destination of our pilgrimage is the house of God. We may be going on different longitudes and latitudes, but where we're really truly heading is up. We're looking for altitude. We're connecting with God. In our spiritual pilgrimage, we're heading to the house of God. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get closer, a closer walk with Thee. We're getting higher in the altitude, closer to God in our pilgrimage. That is the goal. We were in Atlanta for Thanksgiving, as is tradition for us lately, and we like to take a day trip from Atlanta. You know, it's so different than here, weather-wise, and there's still color in the trees. It's really pretty in the fall. And we like to take a little trip and get into the mountains, the beginning of the Appalachian Mountains there in Georgia. And as the kids have gotten older, we can take on a little more challenging hikes. At first, we just kind of go to a waterfall and look at it, and then that would be it. And it's not a big trip. We just go, take a little hike, go to some cute little mountain town and have lunch and head back. But this year we said, no, we're gonna tackle a big one. So we went to one of the highest points, highest elevations in Georgia, right along the border between North Carolina and Georgia. Rabun Bald, it's called. It's on the Bartram Trail, Barb. And did you familiar? No. You were on AT, Appalachian Trail. So, but you know, as you're going, and we realize this, as you're going from here to Atlanta anyway, you're just climbing the whole time. It's less gas on the way back. You just kind of cruise back. So you're climbing, and then from Atlanta, you go, Atlanta's about 1,000 altitude, and then you're going up and up into the mountains. And so we were going to hit this high point, and we just kept going up and up and up and up as far as the car can take us, and then you park your car, and then this is a real point, a top. It's a bald because it's just this rock at the top. And so then you park, and you've got 2 miles to go. You know, it's not exactly like this, but it's like, whoa, there it is, you know. And you wind through some switchbacks, and you're just constantly, you're constantly rising. You might not have that exact straight up direction. You're heading through switchbacks, but you're always rising up. And it was hard, and we had to push through, and it was a great victory to get to the top. And on top of the bald, there was actually an old stone tower that was built where the rangers used to look for forest fires, and that's still there, and there's a platform on the top, so you have 360 degree view of the Appalachians. Is really beautiful, and too windy for pictures, so all of our pictures, our hair's like either in our face or flying all. So that didn't make the Christmas card this year, but anyway, the pilgrimage is up. We're always on that elevation. Psalm 61 has been a psalm that I've been meditating on recently. I was just reading through the Psalms, and it came alive to me, and I've worked on memorizing it. And it's the song, "Lead Me to the Rock that is higher than I." And that's the idea. It's a priest in exile longing to get back to Jerusalem. It's out of reach, but saying to God, bring me back. May I stay in your tent forever, taking refuge in the shelter of your wings, fulfilling my vows. So you see the priest's heart for that pilgrimage, for that connection to God, to be in that high place. And that's the point of pilgrimage. We're always seeking to go higher altitude, closer connection to God. And that's what Jacob does here. He enters the promised land, but he stops in Shechem, which is a little farther north than where he grew up in Beersheba to the south. He stops there, and he clearly plans to stay there because he buys land in Shechem. He buys some land from the Shechemites. And at this point, if you remember, Rachel stole the household gods from her father, Laban, which showed where their spiritual life was. And now Jacob knows about them. At first, he didn't know. She was lying. She was hiding them in her saddle, remember? And Jacob didn't know, and so he was honest with Laban, saying, I didn't steal anything from you. I didn't take your household gods. But Rachel did, and now he knows. We know that he knows. And Rachel was the one of the 4 women that he loved. That's the one he stayed with. Leah had to buy him for the night with mandrakes, remember? So he was with Rachel. That's the tent he would stay in. He would, that was, on his chest of drawers was these little Buddhas, these household gods that she brought in that just showed what, and so he's accepted that. So he's made some progress, but he still has, he has some ways to go. And so Murray had a picture of her grandmother, wonderful grandmother that I never met, I didn't know, and it was one of her cherished pictures of her, but she was next to this clown in the picture. And Murray kept it on our bedside table, and so I had to go to bed every night for several years looking at some old lady that I didn't know and some creepy clown sitting there. And so the point is, get rid of the clowns here is the point. We've got to. It was really sweet. It was hard for her to take that picture down because that was her grandmother. I just, can we take a little piece of cardboard or something, and can we trim this picture down so this fat, creepy clown isn't looking at me? So this is what Jacob does, and it's prompted by two of his sons getting in trouble with the Shechemites. And so God comes in and says, Jacob, appears to him, Jacob, go to Bethel. Beth-El, Beth house, El God, the house of God. Go to Bethel. Get out of here, Jacob. And so he does. He responds, and what he tells everyone in his household, all the children and his wives, he says, purify yourselves. Purify yourselves. Change your clothes. He takes the household gods, and he takes the women's earrings, which apparently were like pagan charms, and he says, we're getting rid of all of that stuff. We're dropping all of that. And so he buries that stuff under the oak in Shechem, and Shechem was a spiritual place for the Canaanites under this great oak that was there. We even hear about it in Joshua later on. There was pagan worship. It was a spiritual place, but it was a spiritually confusing place. And so God said, drop that stuff. Get rid of your clowns. Purify yourself and go to Bethel. The destination of the pilgrimage is God's house. And so he did. He went there. And, we don't have... This brings us to the second point. Our destination is the house of God, but we don't know how to get there. I would not have been able to get to the top of Ravenbald without some good navigation on the telephone, and then some good trail markings as well. We even took a wrong step on the way home and had to kind of figure out, walking through some driveways, some mountain homes. I was teasing him and said, we're going to have to bunk here tonight. I kept doing that to them. I was confident we would find where our car was, but we can't navigate our way to the house of God. We need God to show us. And so we need to follow grace. We can't do it on our own. As much as we try, as much as I want to motivate you, and we see this in a lot of churches and a lot of Christian, it's things you read and hear in speeches. It's like the world. We get motivated and we want to do something, And the truth is, in our pilgrimage to God, we need God to show us the way. We need to simply follow Jesus. So we need to follow Jesus. We need to follow grace. We can't get there. We can't navigate there. Talk about spiritually confusing. Oh, there's many ways up the mountain to God. Well, none of us can find any of those ways, okay? We need to follow Jesus up the mountain. There's no other way. We have to follow God. Not that we're going to judge anyone else, but that's what our religion believes, and that's what the Bible tells us, is we can't get there on our own. We need God to show us. We need God's grace. We need to follow Jesus. And so Jacob did, and he really applies what Jesus was talking exactly. He counted the cost, and he got rid of the things that he didn't need to take the journey. And that's the next point. Give up everything. I think it was Platoon. It came to me this morning when I was looking over my outline here, where there was a brand new soldier, and then the veteran sergeant, and he's got just they say, take off your pack, kid. Don't need that. Don't need that. Don't need that. Don't need that. Continually. Maybe it was the Tom Hanks one, and so that was Willem, wasn't it? Yeah, I think it was. Yeah. Thank you, Conrad. It was Willem in Platoon, and so and he cared enough to Willem was the grace character as opposed to the law. They really had that perfect in the two sergeant. There was a law sergeant and a grace one. And Willem does sacrifice himself at the end, so I never even thought about this. But in that particular scene, that's what Jesus is saying. Because what's happening at that point is Jesus has a big bandwagon of people. They're high off his miracles, and he is a popular man, and he has this big group of people. As he's taking his pilgrimage to Jerusalem, he has this big group of people, and he's weeding them out here. This is not scripture you're going to see on the wall. Unless you hate your mother and your father, your sister and your brother, your spouse and children, even your own life, you cannot follow me. You're not going to see that in calligraphy framed up on the walls, are you? And it's really important. If someone just read that out of context, they would say, "Who's this Jesus guy? I mean, come on." So it's so important to understand the context of what's going on. He has a bunch of followers who are not really in it. They're not all in, and he's saying he's weeding them out and giving them a very strong message. Along with, you have to carry your cross. They knew what a cross was, and there was no metaphor about it. The cross was your death, period. And so he's telling us to hate everybody that's important to us, and to carry nothing but our cross, our death. And so he's speaking to this crowd and really weeding out those who aren't willing to pay the price. And so he's saying, give up everything that you don't need. This is Luke 14:33. Those of you who do not give up everything, you cannot be my disciples. I can't read it exactly, but that's it, unless. Go ahead, Warren. Got it. Okay, so unless you give up everything, I'm tempted to try to soften this for you guys and say, well, Jesus didn't really mean hate your, and go on into all of that, but. What he's doing is challenging us. Those who have ears to hear, hear. Hear this. And what he's saying is, give it to me. Give it up. There are things that we prioritize, and by all means, we certainly, hey, that's my mom. That's my dad. That's my daughter. That's my son. That's my family. It's more important than anything. And Jesus is saying, give it to me. Give it up. You can't carry it anyway. Let me have it. And isn't that the truth? Because we can't, Jesus can do a much better job than we can with those relationships, with those people, with all the things that we can logically say, this is just more important. This is the most important stuff. And Jesus says, nope, give it to me. Give me everything. Give up everything. Give it up. Give it to God. All these relationships that we have that are so important that we try to hold on to and we try to manage, and we do those things by, and we try to do it by our own strength and power instead of giving it to God and letting Him have it. Jesus will do a much, much better job with it. And so Jacob does that. Finally, we've seen in this pilgrimage, I've said this a few times, I didn't realize how much Jacob just rebelled and how long it took him to really, truly come around. But honestly, that's all of our pilgrimage. And there's always more to give up. We grab back a hold. And so we see this moment where Jacob truly gives up everything. He says, look, I'm not going to tolerate the household gods anymore. Get rid of your earrings. All the old stuff we're leaving behind. We are going to the house of God. And Jacob himself named that place because on his way up, that's where God appeared to him. And he had the dream where he saw God standing at the top of the stairway. And God offered him the covenant. And at that point, remember, he said, not quite ready for that, God. And now he's come through this pilgrimage, come back to the same place. Sometimes it's not really the physical destination because he's come around back to the exact same place. But he's taken that spiritual pilgrimage and he's ready to give up everything to God. And so God gives him a new name. This is the fourth point. He's a new person of promise. God says, and we already had the story of Jacob wrestling with the angel, wrestling with God, and getting the name Israel. But now God affirms it and says, now that you've come to my house, and he's built an altar, a place where we can give things to God. Perfect opportunity. God then gives him a new name and says, your name is Israel. You're not to be called Jacob anymore. You're to be called Israel. Just like Abram and Sarai and Isaac as a child was given his name by God. We're given a new name. We're a new person and given a new name. It's like nicknames. When you enter into a community and they start calling you something else, it's really appropriate because what they want, essentially they're saying is, you're not your old self anymore. We're going to give you a new name. The old stuff doesn't stick anymore. And so he gets the new name and then the promises of God. And then God repeats the covenant promises, which are always connected to the land, the promised land, the nation, and then a worldwide blessing, in this case through the king. And so the covenant promises are repeated and then fully accepted by Jacob, by Israel, at that altar as he gives up everything. And so that's our opportunity this morning. It's similar to when Jesus says, hate your mother and father and sister and brother and spouse and children. It's similar to, it helps us recall Abraham earlier in the in the pilgrimage of the patriarchs, where Abraham was called to give up his son, Isaac. Give him up. And so this is our opportunity this morning. Here's the altar. We're in the house of God because we have gathered. And God, one of the things I'm thankful for is God always shows up when we gather together. And so here we are with the same opportunity. And Jesus has laid out the path before us. Here's what we need to do, and here's our opportunity.